She thought the metallic taste in her morning smoothie was just pregnancy nausea. She thought forgetting her mother's surgery was just stress. She thought her husband's concern was love. She was wrong about everything. And by the time she realized the truth, she was locked in a psychiatric facility, told her baby was dead, and watching her husband's mistress wear her grandmother's pearls. This is the true story of how a city councilman and his beautiful assistant spent 3 months systematically poisoning his pregnant wife, gaslighting her into thinking she was losing her mind, staging evidence of alcoholism, and conspiring with doctors to have her declared insane. They had the perfect plan. Fake photos, medical records, locked facilities, lies wrapped in concern. They were weeks away from stealing everything: her baby, her money, her identity, her life. But they made one critical mistake. They underestimated her. And when a billionaire brother, an ex-detective, and one incorruptible judge got involved, their perfect crime began to unravel in the most spectacular way imaginable. If you want to see how this wife went from prisoner to prosecutor, from victim to victor, stay until the end. And if you believe survivors deserve justice, show this story some love below. Your like helps other women find the strength to fight back. Sarah Bennett Hayes woke to golden sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows on the 42nd floor. The downtown skyline stretched before her like a promise, all glass and steel and possibility. She should have felt grateful. Instead, her head spun as she tried to sit up. The bedroom tilted. She grabbed the nightstand, fighting waves of dizziness. "Not again," she whispered. Sarah made it to the bathroom on unsteady legs. Her reflection stared back, pale and drawn. At 32, she looked exhausted. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. When had that happened? She couldn't remember. She vomited into the toilet, hands shaking. Morning sickness, she told herself. That's all it is. Sarah opened the bathroom drawer with trembling fingers. The positive pregnancy test lay hidden beneath tampons and hair ties, right where she'd left it 2 weeks ago. 8 weeks pregnant. She should tell Marcus today. She should have told him the day she found out. But something felt wrong. Sarah couldn't explain it. This creeping sense of unease that followed her through their $8 million penthouse. Marcus was attentive, almost too attentive. He made her breakfast every morning, insisted she drink his special wellness smoothies, asked constantly how she was feeling. "Darling?" Marcus's voice echoed from the bedroom. "Are you all right?" Sarah shoved the test back into the drawer. "Just tired. I'm fine." Marcus appeared in the doorway, perfectly groomed in a tailored suit. At 38, her husband was handsome in that political way, all sharp angles and careful smiles. City Councilman Marcus Hayes, running for mayor, the golden boy of the Hayes political dynasty. "I made your smoothie," he said, holding out a tall glass. "You need to keep your strength up." Sarah hesitated. The glass seemed to tremble in his hand, or maybe that was her vision. Everything felt foggy lately. "You're so good to me, Marcus." She took the glass. The liquid was thick and green, allegedly full of organic vegetables and supplements. Today it tasted different, metallic, sharp. "It tastes weird," Sarah said. Marcus smiled. "New organic blend. Vicky recommended it, supposed to help with stress." Vicky, Victoria Sinclair, Marcus's chief of staff, 28 and stunning, with ice blonde hair and a wardrobe that cost more than most people's cars. Sarah had tried to like her. She'd failed. "Drink up," Marcus urged. "You've been so tired lately." Sarah drank. The metallic taste coated her tongue, but she finished every drop. Marcus watched with dark eyes, his smile never quite reaching them. Her phone buzzed on the counter. A text from an unknown number appeared, then vanished. Sarah blinked. Had she imagined it? "Everything all right?" Marcus asked. "Yes, fine. I thought I saw—" Sarah trailed off. What had she seen? She couldn't remember. Marcus kissed her forehead. "I have to get to City Hall. Big day. Are you sure you're feeling well enough for the charity gala tonight?" The charity gala. Sarah had forgotten. She used to run events like that, back when she was director of the Crossroads Foundation, before she'd given it all up to be the perfect political wife. "I'll be ready," Sarah said. After Marcus left, Sarah sat on the edge of their California king bed. The room was decorated in shades of white and cream, all sharp edges and expensive minimalism. She'd chosen everything herself 3 years ago. Now it felt like a stranger's home. Her phone buzzed again. This time she grabbed it fast. The text from Vicky Sinclair read, "Did she drink it?" Sarah stared at the words. They didn't make sense. Before she could process them, they disappeared. Deleted remotely. "What?" Sarah whispered to the empty room. She checked her messages. Nothing from Vicky. Had she imagined it? The fog in her head grew thicker. Sarah spent the day preparing for the gala, moving through the penthouse like a ghost. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. When she opened her jewelry box to choose accessories, her grandmother's pearl necklace was missing. "I just saw those yesterday," she muttered, pawing through velvet cases. "Where did they go?" She searched everywhere. The pearls had vanished. By evening, Sarah felt worse. Her hands trembled as she zipped herself into an elegant navy gown. Marcus appeared behind her in the mirror, immaculate in his tuxedo. "You look beautiful," he said, but his eyes were cold. The Metropolitan Museum of Art glittered with 300 of the city's elite. Sarah stood beside Marcus in the grand hall, champagne flute in hand, greeting donors and power brokers. The massive chandelier above threw dancing shadows across marble floors. She wasn't drinking the champagne. She was pregnant, though no one knew. She just held the glass, a prop in the performance of her life. "Sarah," a woman in diamonds approached. "Lovely to see you again. How's your mother doing after her surgery?" Sarah's mind went blank. Surgery? Her hip replacement last spring? Right, yes. Sarah's face burned. "She's doing well, thank you." The woman walked away with a concerned glance backward. Marcus's hand tightened on Sarah's elbow. "Darling, you forgot about your mother's surgery." "I'm just tired," Sarah whispered. But embarrassment crawled up her spine. Why couldn't she remember? Her mother hadn't had surgery. Had she? Sarah turned to set down her untouched champagne. Her hands shook. The crystal glass slipped from her fingers. The crash echoed through the ballroom room like a gunshot. Conversation stopped. 200 faces turned toward her. Sarah froze in a pool of spilled champagne, glass shards glittering at her feet. "I'm so sorry," she gasped. "I didn't mean—" Marcus stepped forward smoothly, addressing the crowd with his politician's smile. "Everyone, I apologize. My wife has been under tremendous stress. She's not feeling well." Whispers rippled through the room like poison. "Poor Marcus. She looks terrible. I heard she's been having problems." Sarah wanted to disappear. A waiter rushed over with towels. She backed away, mortified, and nearly collided with Victoria Sinclair. Vicky glided through the crowd in a stunning red dress that hugged every curve. Her blonde hair was pulled into an elegant chignon and around her neck. "Vicky," Sarah breathed. "That necklace." Vicky's hand went to the pearls. Sarah's pearls, her grandmother's pearls. "These?" Vicky smiled. "Marcus gave them to me. He said they were just sitting in a drawer unused. You don't mind, do you?" The room spun. "Those were my grandmother's. I would never—" Marcus appeared at Vicky's side. "Darling, you told me you wanted Vicky to have them. Don't you remember?" "I never said that. I would never give away—" "This is what I've been dealing with," Marcus said loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. "She says things, then completely forgets." Vicky touched his arm with manicured nails. "Poor thing. The pressure of campaign life is just too much for some people." Sarah stared at them. Marcus's hand rested on Vicky's lower back. Intimate. Possessive. They stood too close, looked at each other too long. How had she not seen it before? "Excuse me," Sarah choked out. She fled to the ladies' room on trembling legs. In the gilt mirror, her reflection looked haunted. She splashed cold water on her face, trying to think through the fog. Her best friend Jennifer Marshall found her there. Jennifer, an ER nurse and single mom, had been Sarah's rock since college. "Sarah, honey, I saw what happened out there." Jennifer's dark eyes were worried. "Are you okay? Did you see them together? Marcus and Vicky?" "I saw," Jennifer said quietly. "How long has that been going on?" "I don't know. I can't think straight. Everything's so foggy." Sarah gripped the marble counter. "Jen, I'm forgetting things. Important things. I can't remember conversations. I found a positive pregnancy test 2 weeks ago, and I still haven't told Marcus because something feels wrong." Jennifer's nurse instincts kicked in. What kind of symptoms are you having? Dizziness, memory loss, tremors, metallic taste in my mouth. At first I thought it was morning sickness, but Sarah met her friend's eyes in the mirror. What if it's something else? You need to see a doctor, Jennifer said firmly. Not your family doctor, someone independent. But Sarah's family doctor was Richard Morrison, who'd known her since birth, who delivered her when her mother went into labor at a Hayes family Christmas party. Dr. Morrison was practically family. I'll make an appointment tomorrow, Sarah promised. They returned to the ballroom. Sarah watched Marcus and Vicky from across the room. They stood on the terrace, his hand on her lower back again, his mouth close to her ear. Vicky laughed at something he said, her hand touching his chest. The pearls gleamed at her throat. Sarah's world tilted sideways. She grabbed a table for support. I need to go home, she told Jennifer. I'll get you a car. But Marcus intercepted them. Darling, where are you going? Home, I don't feel well. I'll take you. His grip on her arm was too tight. In the limousine, Sarah stared out the window at passing streetlights. Marcus's cologne filled the small space, expensive and suffocating. You embarrassed me tonight, he said quietly. I dropped a glass. You forgot about your mother's surgery. You accused Vicky of stealing your pearls. You made a scene. His voice was cold. People are starting to talk, Sarah. About what? About whether you're stable enough to be a politician's wife. The words hit like a slap. Sarah turned to face him. Is this really about the campaign? Or is this about Vicky? Marcus's expression didn't change. I don't know what you're talking about. I saw you together on the terrace. You saw me talking to my chief of staff about tomorrow's city council meeting. He looked at her with something like pity. Sarah, this paranoia is getting worse. Maybe you should talk to someone. I'm not paranoid. You're forgetting things, acting erratically. Tonight you embarrassed yourself in front of 300 people. Marcus took her hand. I'm worried about you. We all are. The we sent ice through her veins. Back at the penthouse, Sarah locked herself in the guest bathroom and vomited until nothing came up. When she finally emerged, Marcus was waiting. I made you chamomile tea, he said. It'll help you sleep. The mug sat on the nightstand, steam rising. Sarah looked at it, then at her husband. I'm not drinking that. Sarah, I said no. Something flickered in Marcus's eyes. Anger, frustration. It vanished before she could name it. Fine, he said, but I'm calling Dr. Morrison in the morning. You need help. He left her alone. Sarah waited until she heard his study door close, then poured the tea down the bathroom sink. The liquid left a bitter smell. She climbed into bed fully clothed and lay staring at the ceiling. Her hand rested on her flat stomach, protecting the secret growing there. I won't let them hurt you, she whispered to her unborn child. I promise. But she didn't know who them was, not yet. And she didn't know that by morning the trap would close around her completely. Sarah woke to sunlight and Marcus standing over her with another green smoothie. Good morning, darling, he said. I know you had a rough night. This will help. Every instinct screamed at her not to drink it. But Marcus watched with those dark eyes, waiting. If she refused, he'd ask questions. He'd push. Sarah took the glass and drank. The metallic taste was stronger today. Within an hour, she had an appointment with Dr. Richard Morrison. The doctor's office smelled like antiseptic and old money. Dr. Morrison had treated the Hayes family for 30 years. He'd set Marcus's broken arm when he was 10, diagnosed Sarah's pneumonia on her honeymoon, held her hand after the devastating miscarriage 2 years ago. If anyone would help her, it should be him. Sarah, my dear, Morrison settled into his leather chair, all grandfatherly warmth. Marcus called yesterday. He's very concerned about you. Sarah's stomach dropped. He called? He mentioned you have been having some difficulties. Memory issues, confusion, dizzy spells. Dr. Morrison opened her file. Why don't you tell me what's been going on? Sarah took a breath. I'm pregnant, 8 weeks, but I'm having symptoms that seem wrong. She listed everything, the memory loss, the dizziness, the metallic taste, the tremors, the fog that wouldn't lift. Dr. Morrison listened, making notes. He ran blood work, took her vitals, did a urine test. 15 minutes later, he returned with results on a tablet. Congratulations on the pregnancy, he said. The baby looks healthy. Relief flooded through her. Thank God. But what about my other symptoms? Dr. Morrison's expression shifted, carefully sympathetic. Sarah, Marcus told me something yesterday that concerns me. What? He says you've been drinking. Heavily. The words didn't make sense. What? No, I'm pregnant. I haven't had a single drop of alcohol. Sarah, denial is the first sign. I'm not in denial. Ask anyone. Her voice rose. Test me. Test my blood for alcohol. I did. Dr. Morrison turned the tablet toward her. Your blood alcohol level is 0. See, I'm telling the truth. That just means you're not drinking right now, he said gently. But chronic alcohol abuse would explain all your symptoms. Memory loss, confusion, tremors, combined with the stress of pregnancy. Sarah wanted to scream. Something else is wrong, please. Test for toxins, poisons, anything. Dr. Morrison's eyes held pity. Sarah, I'm going to prescribe some anti-anxiety medication and recommend you see Dr. Patricia Klein. She's a therapist who specializes in, I'm not crazy. No one said crazy. His voice took on that patronizing tone she'd heard too many times. But you're clearly under enormous stress. Let me help you. Sarah left with a prescription she wouldn't fill and a referral she wouldn't use. In the parking lot, she sat in her car and cried until her eyes burned. Her phone buzzed. Marcus. How did the appointment go? He thinks I'm an alcoholic, Sarah said flatly. Darling, maybe he's right. Maybe you need to consider, I'm not drinking, Marcus. I'm pregnant. Silence. Then, we'll discuss this at home. Mother wants to see us for dinner tonight. He hung up. Sarah drove home in a daze. When she arrived at the penthouse, she found her car keys missing from her purse. Marcus had taken them for safety. She was trapped. That evening, Sarah took an Uber to Evelyn Hayes' mansion. The Hayes family estate sprawled across 5 acres of manicured grounds, all old money and older secrets. Marcus's mother ruled this domain like a queen. Sarah knew immediately something was wrong. Too many cars in the circular driveway. Too many lights on in the formal living room. She walked through the grand foyer on trembling legs. Voices drifted from the parlor. Sarah pushed open the heavy doors. Sitting in wingback chairs were Marcus, his mother Evelyn Hayes in Pearls and Judgment, Dr. Morrison, Vicky Sinclair, and a man Sarah didn't recognize. What's going on? Sarah asked. Evelyn Hayes stood. At 65, she was still formidable, with silver hair and the Hayes jawline. Sit down, Sarah. We need to talk. Who are you? Sarah asked the stranger. Arthur Calloway, the man said uncomfortably. I'm an attorney. Marcus hired me to represent you. I don't need an attorney. Sarah, everyone here loves you, Marcus said, standing. We're here because we're worried. The word intervention hung in the air, unspoken but deafening. You're drinking, dear, Evelyn said with ice-cold concern. Not this again, Sarah's voice cracked. I don't drink. I'm pregnant. Marcus pulled out his phone. Sarah, I've been documenting your decline. He showed her photos. Sarah, in her bathrobe at the kitchen table, passed out, a vodka bottle beside her. Sarah holding a whiskey glass with glazed eyes. Her car's interior with empty wine bottles scattered on the floor. Horror crawled up her spine. Those aren't real. Where did you get those? I took them over the past month, Marcus said sadly. You don't remember? You staged them. I've never drunk vodka in my life. Vicky spoke from the corner, perfectly styled in a cream suit. Sarah, I've seen you drinking at the office. Last week you had bourbon in your coffee at 10 in the morning. That's a lie. I wasn't even at your office last week. See, Marcus said to the room. She doesn't even remember. Evelyn moved closer. Sarah, darling, we're admitting you to Riverside Wellness Center. It's a lovely facility that specializes in... No, Sarah backed toward the door. Absolutely not. I'm leaving. If you leave, Marcus said, voice turning cold, I'm filing for emergency psychiatric custody and sole custody of our unborn child. Sarah froze. Marcus continued, Dr. Morrison has documentation. 3 months of symptoms, multiple witnesses to your erratic behavior, and these photos. Arthur here will represent you, but the evidence is overwhelming. Sarah looked at Arthur Calloway. I don't want you. Mrs. Hayes, I think if we just... I don't want any of this, Sarah spun to face Marcus. How long? What? How long have you two been sleeping together? Gasps from Evelyn and Dr. Morrison. Vicky's face remained perfectly blank. Marcus's expression hardened. Sarah, that's your paranoia. She's wearing my pearls. She's wearing my life. Vicky stood, manufactured tears in her eyes. I think the stress has made her delusional. We should call Riverside now. Two men in medical uniforms appeared from the hallway. They'd been waiting. No, Sarah breathed. No, no, no. Marcus approached. I'm sorry, darling. It's for your own good. She ran for the door. The men caught her gently but firmly. Professional. They'd done this before. I'm pregnant, Sarah screamed. You can't drug me. Dr. Morrison opened his medical bag. The medications are pregnancy safe, Sarah. Please don't make this harder. She felt the needle piercing her arm, cold liquid flooding her system. The room tilted. Marcus, please, the baby. Her husband's face swam above her. He leaned close, whispered so only she could hear. There won't be a baby much longer. Terror shot through her fading consciousness. She tried to speak, to scream, but darkness pulled her under. The last thing she saw was Vicky and Marcus standing together, watching her carried out like trash. How long until she loses it? Vicky asked quietly. Marcus's voice came from very far away. Doctor says the stress should cause miscarriage within a week, maybe less. And then we can finally be together. Sarah tried to fight the drugs, tried to hold on to consciousness, tried to protect her baby. But the darkness was complete. She didn't remember the ambulance ride. Didn't remember the intake forms Marcus signed on her behalf. Didn't remember being changed into hospital scrubs and placed in a locked room. When Sarah Bennett Hayes woke up, she was a prisoner, and her nightmare had only just begun. Sarah woke to white. White walls, white ceiling, white sheets pulled tight across a white bed. An IV dripped clear liquid into her arm. The room smelled like lavender and lies. For a moment, she didn't remember. Then it crashed back. The intervention. The restraints, Marcus's whisper about the baby. She sat up too fast. The room spun. Easy there. A nurse in pink scrubs entered, all false cheer. You've been sleeping for a while. How are we feeling? Where am I? Riverside Wellness Center. You're safe here. And what day is it? The nurse checked her chart. Thursday. You've been with us 3 days. 3 days, gone. Erased. I need to call someone, Sarah said. My friend Jennifer. Your husband left strict instructions. No outside contact for 72 hours. Doctor's orders. You can't do that. I have rights. The nurse's smile never wavered. You're on a voluntary psychiatric hold, Mrs. Hayes. Voluntary? Sarah's voice rose. I was dragged here against my will. You signed the admission forms. The nurse showed her a tablet. Sarah's signature sprawled across documents she'd never seen conscious. I was unconscious. This is kidnapping. The nurse pressed a button on the wall. 2 orderlies appeared within seconds. Large men with sympathetic faces and ready hands. Mrs. Hayes needs her medication, the nurse said. Sarah fought. It didn't matter. They held her down with practiced ease and forced pills into her mouth, made her swallow. Watched her throat to ensure she didn't fake it. The drugs hit fast. The edges of the world went soft and distant. The next 3 days blurred together like watercolors in rain. Group therapy with other patients who whispered, "That's the crazy councilman's wife," and avoided her eyes. Art therapy where her hands shook too badly to hold a paintbrush. Mandatory yoga where she couldn't remember the poses from one breath to the next. They made her journal. Write your feelings, they said. Process your trauma. Sarah wrote, I'm not crazy. Marcus is poisoning me. Vicky is stealing my life. Someone please believe me. The counselor read it during their next session. Sarah, these paranoid delusions are concerning. Let's talk about why you feel the need to blame others for your drinking problem. I don't have a drinking problem. Denial is very common at this stage. Sarah wanted to scream. Instead, she shut down, stopped talking in group, stopped writing in her journal, stopped fighting the medications. They thought she was complying. Really, she was planning. On day 5, everything changed. Mrs. Hayes, you have a visitor. Sarah looked up from the jigsaw puzzle she'd been pretending to work on. Jennifer? Ms. Sinclair. The name hit like cold water. Sarah's hands clenched. Vicky entered the common room carrying flowers, dressed in a cream Chanel suit that probably cost $5,000. She looked perfect, untouchable, triumphant. Sarah! Vicky's voice carried through the room, loud enough for staff to hear. Oh, honey, I'm so glad you're getting help. She hugged Sarah. Sarah stood rigid as stone. Vicky sat, took Sarah's hands in her manicured ones. The staff smiled approvingly at this touching show of support. You look terrible, Vicky whispered. Rehab isn't agreeing with you. What do you want? I wanted to thank you. Vicky's whisper was barely audible. For the pearls, for the penthouse, for Marcus. You won't get away with this. Vicky spoke louder for the staff. Sweetie, no one is trying to get away with anything. We're just trying to help you. Then whispered, I moved into the master bedroom yesterday, threw out your clothes. They were so dated. I'm redecorating in my style. Tears burned Sarah's eyes. Why? Because you don't deserve him. Vicky's whisper turned vicious. You took that beautiful, powerful man and made him soft. You held him back. I'm going to make him great. Vicky stood, pulling Sarah into another hug. Her lips brushed Sarah's ear. He's sleeping with me in your bed, on your expensive Italian sheets, and he's better than he's ever been, because he's finally free of you. Vicky pulled back, smiling for the cameras. I'll tell Marcus you're making progress. He misses you so much. After she left, Sarah collapsed. Great, wrenching sobs that she couldn't control. The staff rushed over with concern and increased medications. They thought she was having a breakdown. They had no idea she was being systematically destroyed. That night, Sarah lay in her white room and stared at the ceiling. Her hand rested on her stomach, where her 8-week pregnancy should have been showing. She'd read that some women got baby bumps early. Sarah had nothing, just a flat stomach and the desperate hope that her baby was still alive. A nurse came to give her the evening medications. Sarah took them, held them under her tongue until the nurse left, then spit them into the toilet. She'd been doing this for 2 days, carefully. Enough drugs to seem compliant, not enough to stay foggy. Clarity crept back slowly. With it came rage. Sarah waited until 2 in the morning. Then pulled out the burner phone Jennifer had somehow smuggled to her during a brief visit disguised as another patient's sister. The tiny flip phone had been hidden in a rolled pair of socks, stuffed in a care package that security barely checked. She texted Jennifer, I need help getting out. The response came fast. Tomorrow night, 2 a.m., be ready. Sarah deleted the messages and hid the phone inside her pillowcase. She closed her eyes but didn't sleep. Tomorrow she was escaping this nightmare, or dying in the attempt. At 1:58 in the morning, Sarah's burner phone vibrated. Fire alarm will trigger in 5 minutes. Exit through West Garden door during chaos. Black Honda, loading zone. Sarah dressed in the clothes she'd slept in, sweatpants and a t-shirt. She put on her shoes and waited, heart hammering. At 2:03, the fire alarm split the night. Chaos erupted. Nurses ran through hallways. Patients stumbled from rooms, confused and frightened. Sarah slipped into the crowd and made her way toward the West Wing. The garden door stood propped open for evacuation. Sarah walked through like she belonged there. Just another patient being moved to safety. No one stopped her. The loading zone sat dark and empty. Then headlights flashed once. Jennifer's black Honda. Sarah ran, threw herself into the passenger seat. Go! Jennifer gunned the engine and they were gone, leaving Riverside Wellness Center in the rearview mirror. Oh my God, Sarah gasped. Oh my God, you did it. Are you okay? Did they hurt you? I'm fine, I'm out. That's all that matters. Sarah touched her stomach. I need to find out if the baby's still alive. They've been drugging me for days. We'll get you to County General first thing in the morning, Jennifer promised. Right now, you're staying with me. My apartment isn't fancy, but it's safe. Sarah grabbed her friend's hand. Thank you. I don't know what I would have done. You would have survived, Jennifer said firmly, because you're stronger than they know. Jennifer's apartment was small, cluttered with her daughter's toys and nursing textbooks, but it was warm, safe, Real. Sarah showered, washing away Riverside's antiseptic smell. When she emerged, Jennifer had made tea and pulled out the sofa bed. Tomorrow we go to the police with everything, Jennifer said. Will they believe me? They'll have to. You were held against your will. You were drugged. You have physical evidence of... Sarah's face fell. I don't have evidence. Just my word. And Marcus has photos, medical records, doctors willing to testify that I'm unstable. Then we get our own evidence, Jennifer said. What about Marcus's brother? James, didn't you say he left the family years ago? He's in London. We haven't spoken in 5 years. Maybe it's time to call him. Sarah hesitated. James Hayes had been the black sheep, the eldest son who'd rejected politics and built his own tech empire. The family had disowned him. Marcus despised him, which meant James might actually listen. He's the only one Marcus can't control, Sarah said slowly. She dialed from memory. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Then a groggy voice with the hint of a British accent. Hello? James, it's Sarah. I need help. Silence. Then James was fully awake. Sarah, Christ, what's happened? Marcus told Mum you were in rehab. The story poured out. The poisoning, the gaslighting, the fake photos, Riverside, the escape, everything. I'm pregnant, James, 8 weeks, and Marcus and Vicky are trying to make me lose the baby. They're trying to kill me. More silence. When James spoke, his voice was ice and fury. I'm on the next flight. Send me Jennifer's address. Don't talk to anyone else. I'll be there by tomorrow night. After they hung up, Sarah felt something she hadn't felt in months. Hope. She went to the bathroom and took a pregnancy test Jennifer had bought. Waited 3 minutes that felt like 3 hours. 2 pink lines appeared. Still pregnant. Her baby was alive. Sarah cried with relief and pressed the test to her chest. We're going to make it, she whispered. I promise. She climbed into the sofa bed and slept without drugs for the first time in a week. At 6 in the morning, someone pounded on Jennifer's door. Police, open up! Sarah jolted awake. Jennifer ran from her bedroom in a robe. What's going on? Jennifer cracked the door. 2 officers stood in the hallway. We have a warrant for Sarah Hayes. Emergency psychiatric hold. She escaped from court-ordered medical custody. Court-ordered, Jennifer said. She was never... They pushed inside. Saw Sarah on the couch. Ma'am, you need to come with us. No! Sarah scrambled backward. I'm pregnant! They're lying to you. One officer showed documents. A court order signed by Judge Harold Morrison 3 days ago. Emergency psychiatric hold. Patient deemed a danger to herself. I never saw a judge, Sarah protested. This is fraud. Ma'am, we have to take you back. You can challenge it with a lawyer. Jennifer tried to argue. It didn't matter. They handcuffed Sarah gently but firmly and let her out. Neighbors watched from doorways. The walk of shame. Call James, Sarah shouted as they loaded her into the cruiser. Tell him what happened. The last thing she saw was Jennifer on her phone already dialing. They didn't take her back to the nice room at Riverside. This time, Sarah was processed into the secure psychiatric unit. Metal doors, guards, cameras. No windows, no phones, no hope. A new doctor evaluated her. Dr. Patricia Klein, all ice and clinical detachment. Mrs. Hayes, you violated your treatment plan. You're now on involuntary hold pending psychiatric evaluation. I want a lawyer. You have one. Arthur Calloway. He agrees with the displacement. He works for Marcus. He works for you, but your husband has medical power of attorney while you're deemed incompetent. I'm not incompetent. That's for the court to decide. They put her in a room with a bed bolted to the floor and a window of reinforced plastic that showed nothing but a concrete wall. Sarah sat on the bed and tried not to break. She'd escaped once. They dragged her back. Now the cage was tighter, the lock stronger, and she was completely alone. Or so she thought. That night, lying in the dark, Sarah felt the first cramp. The cramping started small, a twinge in her lower abdomen that Sarah tried to ignore. Just stress, she told herself. Just fear. By midnight, the pain was worse. By 2 in the morning, she woke to blood on the sheets. Help! Sarah screamed. Something's wrong with my baby. Help! Staff rushed in. Nurses, orderlies, Dr. Klein in scrubs. They examined her. took her to the medical wing, ran tests. Sarah lay on the gurney, gripping the rails, praying to any god who would listen. Please, please, please save my baby. Dr. Klein returned after what felt like hours. Her face was professionally sympathetic. Mrs. Hayes, I'm very sorry. You've had a miscarriage. No. The word came out flat, dead. Check again, please. An ultrasound, please. We did. There's no heartbeat. The stress of your escape likely triggered. No, Sarah screamed. The sound was inhuman. My baby was fine yesterday. I know this is devastating, but the psychological trauma you've been experiencing. You're lying. Sarah tried to sit up. Hands pushed her down. Test me again. Someone else, not you. You work for them. Dr. Klein's expression didn't change. Sarah, I know you're in shock. This is very common after. Get away from me. They sedated her. Heavy drugs this time. Sarah fought until she couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't do anything but sink into darkness. When she woke hours later, the truth crashed over her like black water. Her baby was gone. Everything they'd done to her, everything she'd survived, everything she'd fought for, gone. Sarah turned her face to the wall and didn't speak for 3 days. The catatonia set in completely. Sarah stared at nothing, didn't eat, didn't respond when nurses spoke. She was an empty shell, hollowed out by grief. Staff whispered about her in the hallways. Tragic case, post-miscarriage depression. The psychiatric break probably caused it. No one said what they all thought. She did this to herself. On day 3, Dr. Klein tried to get her to talk. Sarah, I know you're grieving, but you need to eat something for your own health. Sarah's voice came out like broken glass. There's no reason to anymore. There's always a reason. My baby was the reason. Now there's nothing. She meant it, without the life growing inside her, without that desperate need to protect something innocent. Sarah had nothing left. Marcus had won. Vicky had won. They'd destroyed her completely. She wished she could just disappear. Meanwhile, in Marcus and Vicky's world, everything was perfect. Marcus's penthouse, the same evening. Vicky stood in Sarah's walk-in closet, her closet now, trying on designer dresses one by one. Each was more expensive than most people's monthly rent. Marcus watched from the bed, tie loosened, shirt unbuttoned. Which one for the campaign gala next week? Vicky held up a Dior gown in midnight blue. This one. The press will notice it's Sarah's. Won't that look bad? Good, Vicky smiled. Let them notice. Let them see I'm not hiding. Sarah's not coming back. She stripped off the dress, stood in lingerie that cost more than the gown. Marcus's eyes tracked her movements. The miscarriage happened this morning, Vicky said casually. Dr. Klein called. And Sarah? Broken, completely gone. Klein says she's catatonic. Vicky climbed onto the bed, straddling Marcus. It's over, baby. She's finished. Now it's just us. They kissed. The camera would have panned away if this were a movie, but real life had no such mercy. On the dresser behind them, Sarah's family photos had been replaced. New frames held pictures of Marcus and Vicky at campaign events, charity dinners, power couple perfection. Sarah Bennett Hayes had been erased. Day 4 of Sarah's catatonia, James Hayes arrived. He'd flown commercial from London, caught a taxi from the airport, and showed up at Riverside Wellness Center at 7 in the morning, looking like righteous fury in an expensive suit. The security guard barely looked up. Family visiting hours are 2 to 4 p.m. I'm her attorney as of 15 minutes ago. James dropped a business card on the desk. Under federal law, you cannot deny attorney-client privilege. Open the door or I'm filing a Section 1983 civil rights lawsuit within the hour. The guard looked at the card. James Hayes, billionaire tech mogul, brother to Councilman Marcus Hayes. The guard reached for the phone. You have 5 minutes, James said. It took 3. They led James through sterile corridors to the secure psychiatric wing. He'd seen Sarah 8 years ago at her wedding, radiant in white. Before that, at family dinners when Marcus first brought her home, laughing and warm and full of life. The woman in the hospital bed looked like a corpse. My God, Sarah. James crossed the room in 3 strides. She didn't move, didn't blink, just stared at the wall with dead eyes. Sarah, it's James. I'm here. Can you hear me? Nothing. James sat on the edge of her bed and took her hand, cold, limp. Sarah, Jennifer called me. She told me everything. I'm getting you out of here. Today. Right now. A tear slid down Sarah's cheek, but she didn't speak. What have they done to you, James whispered. But our Klein entered. Mr. Hayes, you need to leave. Mrs. Hayes is not stable enough for... James stood, all 6 feet 3 inches of controlled rage. Doctor, my family has kept this facility running for 30 years through donations. That ends today unless you discharge my sister-in-law immediately. I don't respond to threats. It's not a threat, it's a promise. You've held a woman on a fraudulent court order. The judge who signed it is my brother's golfing buddy. I have investigators reviewing every document, every medication order, every restraint authorization. Dr. Klein went pale. Everything was done by the book. Then you have nothing to worry about. Discharge her. I can't without... Marcus burst through the door. James, stay out of this. The brothers faced each other. 5 years since they'd spoken. 5 years since the explosive fight that sent James to London. Hello, Marcus, James said coldly. Lovely what you've done with my former sister-in-law. Sarah is my wife. This is my decision. She's a human being. This is her life. She's mentally ill. She needs help. James stepped closer. I've been gone 5 years, but I still remember who you are. Whatever you're doing to her, it ends now. Or what? Or I make it my life's mission to destroy you. The threat hung in the air, palpable and real. Marcus saw something in his brother's eyes he hadn't seen in decades. The man who'd built a $2 billion empire from nothing. The man who'd never lost a fight that mattered. Dr. Klein broke the silence. Gentlemen, please. Discharge her, James said, without taking his eyes off Marcus. Or I'm calling the state medical board right now. Dr. Klein looked at Marcus, then at James, and made her choice. Fine. She's released to your custody. But Mr. Hayes, I need you to sign. I'll sign nothing. Sarah is an adult. She can walk out of here under her own power. James turned to the bed. Sarah, can you hear me? We're leaving. For the first time in 3 days, Sarah moved. Her head turned, her eyes focused on James's face. James, her voice was barely audible. You came. Of course I came. He helped her sit up. Let's get you out of here, Bisham. Sarah stood on shaking legs. James supported her weight as they walked toward the door. Marcus blocked their path. You're making a mistake. She's not well. Sarah looked at her husband, really looked at him, and found her voice. The only mistake I made was trusting you. They walked past him, out of the secure ward, through the corridors, into sunlight. Sarah breathed fresh air for the first time in 8 days and started to cry. Not from grief, from relief. She was free. Marcus stood in Riverside's doorway watching them go. He pulled out his phone, texted Vicky, "We have a problem." Vicky replied immediately, "Handle it." But it was too late. The billionaire brother had arrived, and everything was about to change. James took Sarah to his hotel suite at the Waldorf, 23rd floor, all windows and luxury and safety. He ordered room service, ran her a bath, gave her space to breathe. I can't believe you're here, Sarah said, wrapped in a hotel robe with tea in her hands. After 5 years of nothing. I've been keeping track, James admitted, through mutual friends. I knew something was wrong when I heard you were in Riverside. Why didn't you come back before? Because Marcus is my brother, and I thought maybe I was wrong about him. James's jaw tightened. I wasn't. He made phone calls, lots of them. Within an hour, Robert Bobby Sullivan arrived. Bobby Sullivan was 48, ex-NYPD homicide detective, with the build of a boxer and the eyes of someone who'd seen too much. He set his briefcase on the coffee table and looked at Sarah with professional assessment. Mrs. Hayes, James hired me to help you. I need you to tell me everything from the beginning. Sarah told her story. 3 months of symptoms, the morning smoothies, the photos, the intervention, Riverside, the miscarriage that broke her. Bobby took notes the old-fashioned way, pen and paper. You believe your husband and his assistant are having an affair? I know they are. Affair is one thing. What you're describing is conspiracy to commit attempted murder. I know how it sounds. You sound like a woman who's been systematically abused. Bobby met her eyes. I believe you. Those 3 words broke something in Sarah. She started crying. Jennifer arrived minutes later and held her while she sobbed. When Sarah could speak again, Bobby laid out his plan. Here's what we do. I plant surveillance in Marcus's office at City Hall. Technically illegal, but do it, James said. I'll handle the legal consequences. If we can get them on tape discussing the poisoning, we have proof. But it's inadmissible in court, Sarah said. Not if we get corroborating evidence, like a toxicology report. James leaned forward. Can we test Sarah's blood now? After 10 days, most compounds are out of her system. But if we can get them talking about specific substances, we can match them to her symptoms. And there are hair follicle tests that go back 90 days. Do it, James said. Test everything. There's something else, Sarah said quietly. They told me I miscarried, but I don't trust them. What if we get you to a real hospital, James finished. County General, private exam. We'll find out the truth. County General Hospital, 4 hours later. Dr. Rebecca Thompson was a no-nonsense OBGYN in her 40s. She performed the ultrasound while Sarah held her breath. Mrs. Hayes. Dr. Thompson turned the screen. There's a heartbeat, Sarah gasped. On the monitor, a tiny flicker pulsed, steady, strong, alive. You're about 10 weeks pregnant. The baby is perfectly healthy. They lied. Sarah started crying. They told me my baby was dead. They lied to break me. Dr. Thompson's face hardened. Who told you that? Riverside Wellness Center. Dr. Klein. Without an ultrasound? That's medical malpractice. You can't diagnose miscarriage without visual confirmation. Sarah touched the screen where her baby's heartbeat flickered. They wanted me to give up, to believe I had nothing left to fight for. They failed, James said from the corner. You're still here. The baby's still here. Dr. Thompson printed ultrasound photos and ran comprehensive blood work. I'm testing for everything. If they've been dosing you with something, we'll find it. The hair follicle test results would take 3 days, but preliminary blood work showed elevated lithium levels, the kind from supplements, not prescription medication, and traces of something else, a chelation compound. What does that mean? Sarah asked. Dr. Thompson pulled up medical journals on her tablet. Heavy metal chelation compounds are usually used to treat lead poisoning, but in high doses they can cause exactly the symptoms you described. Brain fog, memory loss, confusion. Bobby's eyes lit up. They've been poisoning her with supplements. It's sophisticated, Dr. Thompson said. Most doctors would never think to test for this. The symptoms mimic anxiety, stress, even early dementia. Can you put all this in writing? James asked. Official medical documentation? Absolutely, and I'm reporting Riverside to the medical board. They left County General with ammunition, medical proof, scientific evidence, the truth on paper. Now they needed Marcus and Vicky to confess on tape. Bobby worked fast. While James kept Sarah safe in his hotel suite, Bobby spent 3 days planting surveillance in Marcus's office. City Hall security was good. Bobby was better. Tiny microphones hidden in the bookshelf. A camera in the smoke detector. All feeding to a receiver in Bobby's van parked 2 blocks away. For 2 days, Bobby recorded boring city council meetings, discussions about zoning laws and budget allocations. On the 3rd night, Marcus and Vicky stayed late. Bobby sat in his van with headphones on, eating cold pizza, about to give up. Then Vicky's voice came through the speakers, crystal clear. She's with James. That's bad. Bobby dropped his pizza, hit record on 3 different devices. It doesn't matter, Marcus replied. We have the court order. She has no credibility. What if she goes to the police? And says what? My husband poisoned me, but I have no proof. She sounds inane. The smoothies, Marcus, what if they test her blood? It's been 2 weeks. The lithium supplements are out of her system. The chelation binder is long gone. Bobby's eyes widened. He scribbled notes. Lithium supplements, chelation binder. Exactly what Dr. Thompson had found. I still can't believe the miscarriage story worked, Vicky said. She just gave up. She was already broken. We just finished the job. Do you think she actually lost the baby? Or did Dr. Klein lied? The baby's probably fine, but Sarah thinks it's dead, which is all that matters. Bobby had heard enough confessions in his NYPD days to know gold when he heard it. This was platinum. The recording continued. 12 minutes of Marcus and Vicky discussing specific dosages. 500 milligrams of lithium orotate twice daily. Russian chelation supplements that cause brain fog. Staging the drunk photos while Sarah was passed out from sedatives mixed in her tea. The future they planned. Once the divorce was final and Sarah was declared incompetent, they'd move her to an Arizona facility and take control of her trust fund. Mrs. and Mr. Mayor, Vicky said, has a nice ring to it. They were laughing when Bobby stopped the recording. He called James immediately. I have them. Every word. They confessed to everything. Back at the hotel, Bobby played the recording for Sarah and James. Sarah listened to Marcus's voice discussing her destruction like she was a business problem to solve. Heard Vicky laugh about stealing her life. Heard them plan her future in a facility she'd never escape. When it ended, Sarah was shaking. Not from fear, from rage. That's proof, she said. It's inadmissible, Bobby reminded her. Illegally obtained evidence. But it tells us exactly what to look for, James said. And Sarah's medical records from County General already show those exact compounds. There's one problem, Bobby said. We need a judge who'll listen and who can't be bought. Judge Evelyn Reed, Sarah said immediately. Both men looked at her. She has a reputation, Sarah explained, for absolutely despising liars. And she's been on the bench 40 years. No one owns her. Marcus filed for divorce 2 weeks ago, James said, and to have you declared mentally incompetent. Perfect, Bobby said. We make our case in court. But the recording is still inadmissible. What if the judge received it anonymously, James asked. Marked evidence of criminal conspiracy. Let her decide what to do with it. Bobby considered. That's a risk. She could throw it out completely. Or she could do what I would do, Sarah said. Listen to it, then order independent testing that corroborates everything on the recording, making it admissible under the fruit of the poisonous tree exception. James smiled. You've been researching legal theory. I've had a lot of time to think. Bobby packaged the recording on a USB drive, addressed it to Judge Evelyn Reed's chambers, included a note. Evidence of criminal conspiracy. Hayes Vati, Hayes divorce case, recorded without consent, inadmissible but truthful. He mailed it the next day. Now we pray, Bobby said. They didn't have to pray long. 3 days later, Sarah received notification that her divorce hearing was scheduled in Judge Evelyn Reed's courtroom. In 2 weeks, Marcus's lawyer tried to have Sarah declared incompetent before the hearing. Judge Reed denied the motion and ordered Sarah to appear in person. She wants to see you, James said. That's good. Sarah wasn't sure. In 2 weeks, she'd face Marcus in open court, with press, with cameras, with the whole world watching. If Judge Reed hadn't listened to the recording, Sarah would be destroyed. If she had, everything could change. Sarah spent those 2 weeks preparing, eating properly, sleeping without drugs, regaining strength. Her baby bump was visible now at 12 weeks. She bought a simple navy dress that hid it. She wasn't ready to tell the world yet. Jennifer helped her practice testimony. James hired a better lawyer to replace Arthur Calloway, though Arthur promised to be there for support. Bobby gathered more evidence, medical records, pharmacy receipts showing Marcus buying supplements, bank records showing payments to Dr. Morrison. Everything pointed to conspiracy. But would it be enough? The night before the hearing, Sarah couldn't sleep. She stood at James's hotel window, looking out at the city that had been her home for 8 years. You don't have to do this, James said from behind her. We can fight from a distance. Civil suit, criminal charges. You don't have to face them. Yes, I do, Sarah turned. They tried to make me disappear, to erase me. I need them to see that I'm still here. What if you lose? Then at least I fought back. James crossed the room and took her hands. Sarah, I need to tell you something. I should have said this 5 years ago before Marcus proposed. Sarah's breath caught. I've loved you since the day we met, James said quietly. At that charity gala when Marcus first brought you home. You were talking about your nonprofit work, so passionate and alive. I thought, this woman is going to change the world. And then Marcus asked you to marry him, and I knew I'd lost my chance. James, I'm not telling you this to pressure you. I'm telling you because you should know. Whatever happens tomorrow, you're not alone. You have me, for as long as you want. Sarah kissed him, soft and brief and full of possibility. After this is over, she whispered, we'll figure out what comes next. But first, I need to bury them. Then let's bury them. Tomorrow, Sarah would walk into that courtroom. Tomorrow, she would face her demons. Tomorrow, everything would change. Courtroom 3B was packed, press in the gallery, Marcus's political allies filling the front rows, society vultures hoping for scandal. Sarah entered through the side door, flanked by James and Arthur Calloway. Every eye turned. Whispers rippled like wind through wheat. Is that her? She looks awful. I heard she escaped from rehab twice. Sarah held her head high. She wore the navy dress, minimal makeup, hair pulled into a simple bun. She looked like what she was, a woman who'd survived hell and lived to tell about it. Marcus sat at the plaintiff's table with Benjamin Croft, his shark lawyer, in a $5,000 suit. Marcus looked perfect as always, concerned husband, performing for cameras. Vicky sat in the second row, wearing Sarah's Cartier bracelet and pearl necklace. She met Sarah's eyes and smiled. Small, triumphant. Sarah smiled back and saw confusion flicker across Vicky's face. The bailiff stood. All rise. The Honorable Judge Evelyn Reed presiding. Judge Reed entered, 65, steel gray hair, and eyes that could dissect a lie at 50 paces. She'd been on the bench for 40 years and had a reputation. You did not lie in Evelyn Reed's courtroom. She sat, arranged files on her desk, and looked up. We are here for Hayes versus Hayes, divorce and mental competency hearing. Her voice carried authority. Before we begin, I'd have new information to share with the court. Sarah's heart stopped. The recording. Had she listened? Yesterday, Mrs. Sarah Hayes collapsed in preliminary proceedings after testifying under oath. I ordered comprehensive toxicology screening at County General Hospital. Marcus and Vicky exchanged glances. Quick. Panicked. The results, which I received last night, show elevated levels of lithium orotate, a non-prescription supplement, and traces of a heavy metal chelation compound, neither of which Mrs. Hayes was prescribed. Gasps from the gallery, press scribbling frantically. Croft jumped up. Your Honor, those could be from anything. Over-the-counter supplements, herbal. Mr. Croft, I wasn't finished. These compounds, according to the toxicologist, can cause symptoms including memory loss, confusion, dizziness, tremors, and in high doses, complete cognitive breakdown. Marcus stood. Your Honor, this is absurd. Sarah has been taking those supplements for anxiety. This is a... Mr. Hayes, I didn't ask you to speak. Sit down. Marcus sat. His perfect mask cracked slightly. Judge Reed continued. 2 weeks ago, I received an anonymous package. Inside was an audio recording. Vicky went white, stood up from her seat in the gallery. Ms. Sinclair, please sit down. Vicky sat, hands shaking. This recording describes in specific detail a poisoning plot using lithium orotate supplements and heavy metal chelation compounds, the same compounds found in Mrs. Hayes's blood work. Croft was on his feet. Your Honor, any illegally obtained recording is inadmissible under... I'm aware of the law, Mr. Croft, and you're correct, the recording was inadmissible. Until now. Your Honor, I don't understand. The recording describes specific compounds. Those exact compounds were independently found in Mrs. Hayes's medical tests. The inadmissible evidence has been corroborated by legal means. Under the fruit of the poisonous tree exception, it becomes admissible to prevent immediate harm. The DA stood from her side table. Your Honor, the district attorney's office concurs. This is a matter of public safety. Judge Reed nodded. Bailiff, please play the recording for the court. The courtroom speakers crackled to life. Vicky's voice crystal clear. She's still not getting worse fast enough. Marcus, are you sure you're using the full dose? The gallery erupted. Judge Reed slammed her gavel. Marcus's voice. I'm using exactly what you told me. 2 drops of the chelation binder in her morning tea and a full capsule of the lithium crushed into her smoothie. Marcus's face went gray. Vicky stared straight ahead, frozen. The recording continued, every damning word, 12 minutes of conspiracy laid bare. Vicky's laugh, let it taste different. She's so fogged she'll forget by lunch. She's pathetic. Marcus, it feels she's still my wife, Vicky. Vicky cold. She's not your wife, Marcus. She's an obstacle. And we're removing her. Press cameras flashed. Someone in the gallery gasped. Another started crying. The recording rolled on. Discussing dosages, staging photos, corrupting Dr. Morrison, planning Sarah's future in an Arizona facility where they'd drain her accounts. And then Vicky, what about the baby? Marcus, what about it? Vicky, she's pregnant, Marcus. What if the baby... Oh, Marcus, the stress alone should cause a miscarriage. If not, we'll have Dr. Klein at Riverside handle it. Multiple people gasped. Sarah heard someone behind her whisper, oh my God. The recording continued for 7 more agonizing minutes. When it finally ended, the courtroom sat in stunned silence. Every eye turned to Marcus and Vicky. Mr. Hayes, Judge Reed said, voice like ice. Ms. Sinclair, do you have anything to say? Marcus stood on shaking legs. That recording is fake. A deep fake. AI generated. This is my brother setting me up to a deep fake that perfectly predicts the exact compounds found in your wife's blood work 2 weeks later. It's a coincidence. She was taking those supplements for... Did you give her those supplements, Mr. Hayes? Marcus was trapped. I made her smoothies, yes, but did those smoothies contain lithium orotate and chelation compounds? Croft grabbed Marcus's arm. Your Honor, my client invokes his Fifth Amendment. Too late, Mr. Croft. He already answered. Judge Reed turned to Vicky. Ms. Sinclair? Vicky stood, voice trembling. This is Marcus. This was all Marcus. I had nothing to do with. You bitch, Marcus exploded. This was your idea, your plan. You're the one who is poisoning her. I just knew about it. You told me what to buy. You told me how much to use. They turned on each other like rabid dogs. Exactly as planned. In the gallery, Bobby Sullivan smiled slightly. Bailiff, Judge Reed said, restore order. But it was too late. The alliance was broken. Marcus and Vicky blamed each other in increasingly desperate voices, each trying to save themselves. District Attorney Jennings, Judge Reed said over the chaos, your recommendation? DA Rebecca Jennings stood. Based on this evidence, the state recommends immediate arrest of Marcus Hayes and Victoria Sinclair on charges of conspiracy to commit attempted murder, aggravated assault, fraud, and perjury. Bailiff, please take Mr. Hayes and Ms. Sinclair into custody. The gallery erupted again. Marcus backed away from approaching bailiffs. No, this is illegal. I'm a councilman. You were a councilman, Judge Reed said coldly. Now you're a criminal defendant. They grabbed him. Handcuffs clicked. Marcus fought, screaming. Vicky didn't resist. She stood like a statue as they cuffed her, shock blanking her features. Side by side, the power couple who'd plotted Sarah's destruction. Now in chains. This is your fault, Marcus hissed at Vicky. All of it. You ruined both our lives for nothing. Vicky's voice was dead. She's still alive. We failed. As they were led away, press cameras flashed like lightning. Marcus saw the cameras and screamed, this is a frame-up! My brother orchestrated this! James did this! James stood in the gallery. No, Marcus, you did this. To yourself. The doors closed behind them. The courtroom buzzed with shocked conversation. Sarah sat at the defendant's table, staring at her hands. It was over. They'd confessed, been arrested, destroyed. She'd won. So why did she feel so empty? Sarah? James touched her shoulder. Are you all right? I need air. They walked out through the side exit, avoiding press. In the courthouse hallway, Sarah leaned against the wall and tried to breathe. It's over, James said. Is it? Sarah looked at him. They tried to kill me, James, kill our baby. And I just sat there, listening to them admit it. Part of me still can't believe it's real. It's real, and they're going to prison. What about Dr. Morrison, Dr. Klein? Everyone who helped them. Bobby's already coordinating with the DA. They're all going down. Sarah nodded, but the victory felt hollow. She touched her stomach, where her baby grew, still alive, still fighting. I need to get out of here, she said. They left through a back entrance, avoiding the press circus out front. James took her back to the hotel. Bobby arrived an hour later with updates. Dr. Morrison has been arrested, medical license suspended. Riverside Wellness Center is under FBI investigation. Dr. Klein is in custody. And Marcus and Vicky? Held without bail, facing 20-plus years each. Good. Sarah looked out the window at the city below. I want to press charges, civil and criminal. I want them to pay for everything. Already in motion, Bobby said. James and Arthur have been building the civil case. Fraud, emotional distress, attempted murder, medical malpractice, conspiracy, defamation. We're suing for $50 million plus all marital assets. I don't want his money. It's not his money anymore, James said gently. It's compensation for what he tried to take from you. Your health, your sanity, your baby, your life. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Then, okay, do it. Bobby left to coordinate with the DA. James ordered room service that Sarah didn't eat. You should rest, he said. I can't. Every time I close my eyes, I see them, hear them on that recording, laughing about what they did to me. They're not laughing now. That was true. Sarah thought about Marcus and Vicky in holding cells, their perfect lives shattered. Part of her felt satisfaction. Part of her just felt tired. What happens now, she asked. Now you heal, James said. You recover. You decide what you want your life to look like, without them. What if I don't know? Then we figure it out together, one day at a time. Sarah looked at this man who'd flown across an ocean to save her, who'd fought his own family to protect her, who was looking at her now with something that looked like love. James, I'm broken. I don't know if I can. You're not broken. You're healing. There's a difference. I'm pregnant with your brother's child. I know, and that child is going to be loved and protected. I promise you that. Sarah started crying. James held her while she sobbed out months of pain and fear and rage. When she finally stopped, she felt lighter. Thank you, she whispered. Always. That night, for the first time in months, Sarah slept without nightmares. 6 months later, the same courtroom, but everything had changed. Sarah sat in the gallery this time, 7 months pregnant, visibly glowing. James sat beside her, their hands intertwined. Jennifer was on her other side. Bobby Sullivan sat behind them, looking satisfied. At the defendant's table, Marcus and Vicky sat in orange jumpsuits, shackled, guarded. Marcus had lost 30 pounds. His perfect politician's appearance had crumbled. Unshaven, hollow-eyed, broken. Vicky looked skeletal. No makeup, hair pulled back, all her beauty stripped away, leaving only the hollow shell of the woman who tried to steal someone else's life. Judge Reed entered. We're here for sentencing in the state versus Marcus Hayes and Victoria Sinclair. Multiple counts of conspiracy, attempted murder, fraud, and perjury. The gallery was packed again, but this time everyone was on Sarah's side. Before I pass sentence, does the victim wish to make a statement? Sarah stood, walked to the microphone, faced the two people who tried to erase her. For 3 months, you made me think I was losing my mind. You made me doubt reality itself. You tried to steal my baby, my home, my identity, my life. Marcus started crying. Sarah, I'm so sorry. I never meant. You don't get to speak. Sarah's voice was steel. Not anymore, not ever again. She continued. You almost succeeded. You had doctors, lawyers, facilities all lying for you. You had my own body betraying me. You had everyone convinced I was crazy. Almost everyone. Sarah turned to James, smiled, then faced her tormentors again. But you underestimated me. You thought I was weak. You thought I would break. You were wrong. She looked at Vicky. And you thought you deserved my life because I didn't appreciate it enough. But here's the truth. You were right about one thing. I didn't appreciate it because it was built on lies. And now I have a real life. One I built myself, one you can never touch. Sarah placed both hands on her pregnant belly. This baby you tried to kill, she's healthy, strong, and she'll grow up knowing her mother fought for her. that her mother survived monsters like you. I hope you both think of me every day in prison. I hope you remember the woman you tried to erase, because I'm still here, and you're not." The gallery erupted in applause. Judge Reed didn't stop it for a full minute. When silence finally fell, she spoke. "Marcus Hayes, Victoria Sinclair, you represent the worst of humanity. You exploited trust, abused power, and nearly destroyed an innocent woman and her unborn child for nothing more than ambition and greed." Judge Reed looked at her notes. "Mr. Hayes, you are sentenced to 25 years in federal prison. Ms. Sinclair, you are sentenced to 18 years. No parole eligibility for 15 years. Marcus broke down completely. Vicky just stared at nothing. "Bailiff, remove them." As they were led away, Marcus and Vicky didn't even look at each other. The partnership that had destroyed lives had destroyed itself. Sarah watched them go and felt nothing. No satisfaction, no triumph, just relief that it was finally over. Outside the courthouse, press swarmed. Sarah made a brief statement. "Today, justice was served, but this isn't just about me. This is about every person who's been gaslit, abused, and told they're crazy when they're simply being systematically destroyed. Believe victims, believe women, and if you're experiencing this, please reach out. You're not alone." The clip would go viral. Sarah became a symbol. But that came later. First, she had to rebuild her life. The civil case settled out of court. $47 million. Marcus's trust fund, the penthouse, the art collection, everything. His mother, Evelyn Hayes, helped. She'd been horrified by what her son had done. She testified against him, disowned him publicly, and made sure Sarah got every penny she was owed. "I failed as a mother," Evelyn told Sarah during one difficult conversation. "I raised a monster. I'm so sorry." "You didn't know," Sarah said. "I should have. I saw signs and ignored them because protecting the family name was more important." Evelyn took Sarah's hand. "Can you forgive me?" "I can try. It would take time." But Evelyn was trying. She set up a trust fund for Sarah's unborn baby. She made public statements supporting abuse survivors. She tried to atone. Some wounds took longer to heal. Dr. Morrison lost his medical license permanently. He testified against Marcus in exchange for reduced charges, serving 2 years instead of 10. Dr. Klein at Riverside lost her license too. The facility was shut down. FBI investigation revealed dozens of patients held inappropriately. Lawsuits piled up. Vicky's family in the foster system released statements condemning her actions. Old friends deleted her from their lives. She became a cautionary tale. Marcus's political career was destroyed. Campaign donors demanded refunds. His seat on city council went to someone else. Every scandal sheet ran stories. Poison husband, the councilman's deadly secret, political wife killer. The mayor publicly distanced himself. Marcus became a pariah. But none of that was Sarah's concern anymore. She had moved on. 1 year later, Sarah Bennett, she'd taken back her maiden name, stood in the kitchen of her new home. Not the penthouse, not a mansion. A charming 3-bedroom house in a quiet neighborhood with good schools and friendly neighbors. It was hers, bought with settlement money and filled with furniture she'd chosen herself. Every room reflected who she was, not who someone wanted her to be. In the high chair by the window, 6-month-old Hope giggled at dust motes dancing in morning sunlight. She had Sarah's dark hair and James's blue eyes, which was impossible since James wasn't her biological father. But genetics did funny things sometimes. Sarah had given birth 4 months after the sentencing. Natural delivery, healthy baby girl, surrounded by Jennifer and James in love. She'd named her Hope, because that's what had kept her alive through the darkest times. "How's my goddaughter?" Jennifer swept into the kitchen with coffee and pastries. She slept through the night for the first time. "That's amazing." Jennifer picked up Hope, who immediately grabbed her nose. "And how are you?" "Happy," Sarah meandered. "Really, genuinely happy, for the first time in years." "The civil case?" "Settled, $47 million. His mother, Evelyn, actually helped. She wanted to make things right." "What will you do with it?" "I'm restarting my nonprofit, the Crossroads Foundation. But this time it'll focus on helping women escape abusive relationships And I'm funding a program to train doctors to recognize poisoning symptoms. Jennifer hugged her. I'm so proud of you. A knock on the door interrupted them. Sarah opened it to find James on the doorstep, holding coffee and fresh pastries. I brought breakfast, he said. Thought you might be tired after Hope's first full night of sleep. You brought breakfast yesterday too, Sarah said, smiling. Did I? Must have slipped my mind. He wasn't fooling anyone. James came by every morning, sometimes for breakfast, sometimes just to see them. He'd been doing it for 8 months, ever since Sarah moved into this house. He picked up Hope, who squealed, Jay, and grabbed his tie. She's getting so big, James said. She loves you, Sarah observed. The feeling's mutual. Sarah and James had been dancing around their feelings for a year, taking things slow. He'd been patient, hadn't pushed, just shown up every day and proved he wasn't going anywhere. After Jennifer left, Sarah and James sat on the porch while Hope napped. It was one of those perfect autumn mornings, all golden light and cool air. James, I've been thinking, Sarah said. About? About us. About what happens next. James set down his coffee. Sarah, I don't want to rush you. You've been through hell. You need time to... It's been a year. I'm healed. Well, healing. And I know what I want. What do you want? I want to figure out if we could be something. Real. Not rushed, not desperate, just real. James smiled, the kind of smile that lit up his whole face. I'd like that. We could start with dinner. That's very formal. You're a formal guy. How about we start with breakfast? Here, with Hope, and see where it goes. Perfect. They sat in comfortable silence, watching leaves fall from the oak tree in Sarah's yard. Can I ask you something? James said, and about Marcus. Sarah tensed slightly. Okay. Do you still think about him? Every day. Sarah's honesty surprised her. Not because I miss him, because I'm angry about the time he stole, the trust he betrayed, the me I was before him. The person you were before is still in there. No, Sarah shook her head. That person died, and I'm okay with that, because the person I am now is stronger. She survived. She fought back. She won. I like the person you are now, James said quietly. Me too. They were interrupted by Hope waking up from her nap, crying for attention. Sarah brought her out to the porch. Hope immediately reached for James. They looked like a family, the three of them, sitting on a porch in golden autumn light. Maybe they could be one. Eventually, when Sarah was ready. For now, this was enough. 6 months later, Sarah stood in front of a room full of women at her new foundation's first official meeting. Former abuse victims, survivors, fighters. I'm Sarah Bennett, she said. And 3 years ago, my husband tried to poison me. He gaslighted me, drugged me, institutionalized me, and tried to make me lose our baby. He almost succeeded. The women listened with recognition in their eyes. They'd all been there. Different details, same story. But I survived, Sarah continued. And so did you. We're here because we refuse to disappear. We refuse to be erased. And now we're going to help others do the same. The Crossroads Foundation had evolved. What started as a nonprofit helping homeless families had become something bigger. A sanctuary for women escaping abuse. A training center for medical professionals to recognize poisoning symptoms. A legal fund for those fighting corrupt spouses and systems. Sarah poured her settlement money into it, $47 million buying freedom for hundreds of women. It felt right, like the life Marcus tried to steal had transformed into something he could never touch. We have doctors on staff who will believe you, Sarah told the room, lawyers who will fight for you, therapists who understand gaslighting, and most importantly, you have each other. You're not alone. After the meeting, Sarah stood in her office looking at framed photos. Her daughter Hope, Jennifer, James, Bobby Sullivan, who now consulted for the foundation full-time, and one photo of herself from 3 years ago, at that charity gala where everything started to fall apart. She looked beautiful and hollow, wearing that fake political smile. Sarah barely recognized her. Knock, knock, James appeared in the doorway. What are you doing here? Taking you to lunch. You forgot to eat again. Sarah smiled. I had coffee. Coffee's not lunch. Come on. They went to a small cafe near the foundation's offices, sat outside in spring sunshine, ordered sandwiches they'd barely touched because they were too busy talking. Hope said Dada this morning, Sarah mentioned casually. James nearly spit out his water. What? Well, she said Dada. I think she was pointing at you in that photo on the fridge. Sarah. James's voice was thick with emotion. I know you're not her biological father, but you've been there for every doctor's appointment, every midnight feeding, every first everything. You're her dad in every way that matters. Is that what you want? Sarah reached across the table, took his hand. Yes, if you do. Sarah Bennett, I've been in love with you for 9 years. Being Hope's father, being part of your family, that's all I've ever wanted. Then ask me. James blinked. Ask you what? You know what? He did. He'd been carrying the ring for 3 months, waiting for the right moment. Right there in a cafe with coffee cups and sandwich plates, James Hayes got down on one knee. Sarah Bennett, will you marry me? People at nearby tables stopped eating, watched, waited. Sarah looked at this man who'd saved her life, who'd fought his own family to protect her, who'd shown up every single day for a year and a half, proving he wasn't Marcus, proving he was different. Yes, the cafe erupted in applause. James slipped a simple diamond ring on her finger and kissed her. It wasn't like her first wedding, no massive ceremony, no society guests, no performance. This was real, messy and beautiful and real. They got married 3 months later in Sarah's backyard. 50 people. Jennifer as maid of honor, Bobby as best man, Hope as flower girl, toddling down the aisle, throwing petals everywhere except where they were supposed to go. Evelyn Hayes came. She'd spent the past 2 years trying to atone for her son's sins. She'd become a grandmother to Hope, careful but loving. Sarah had forgiven her, mostly. Marcus and Vicky weren't mentioned. They existed in prison cells somewhere, serving their sentences. That part of Sarah's life was closed. Judge Evelyn Reed came to the wedding as a guest, bringing her own story about recognizing abuse in her first marriage. She'd started consulting for Sarah's foundation, training other judges. Dr. Thompson from County General came. She'd been instrumental in shutting down Riverside and reforming how psychiatric facilities operated. It was a gathering of survivors and fighters, people who'd been broken and rebuilt themselves stronger. When Sarah walked down the aisle to James, Hope in her arms, she wasn't the frightened woman who'd collapsed in a courtroom. She was someone new, someone forged in fire and emerged unbreakable. I love you, she told James when they reached the altar. I love you too, both of you. Hope grabbed James's nose and everyone laughed. They exchanged vows they had written themselves. Promises about showing up, being honest, building something real together. No performance, no facade, just truth. When they kissed, Sarah thought about the woman she'd been 3 years ago, trapped in a penthouse prison, being poisoned slowly, thinking she was losing her mind. That woman would never have believed this was possible. But here Sarah stood, married to a man who actually loved her, mother to a beautiful daughter, running a foundation that helped hundreds of women escape what she'd escaped. She'd survived. More than survived. She'd won. As they walked back down the aisle, newly married, Hope threw more flower petals everywhere. Jennifer wiped happy tears. Bobby nodded approvingly. And in a prison cell, 200 miles away, Marcus Hayes sat alone thinking about the wife he'd destroyed and lost. But Sarah wasn't his wife anymore. Hadn't been for 3 years. She was Sarah Bennett Hayes now, a different person, a stronger person, a free person. And she was never looking back. 5 years after the wedding, Sarah stood in her foundation's new headquarters, a renovated warehouse in downtown. 3 floors of offices, counseling rooms, medical facilities, and safe apartments for women escaping abuse. The Crossroads Foundation had grown exponentially. What started with Sarah's settlement money now had donors nationwide. They'd helped over 2,000 women, trained 500 medical professionals, changed laws in 7 states about psychiatric holds and gaslighting recognition. Sarah had become a voice. She gave TED Talks, wrote a book, appeared on news programs, all talking about her experience and how to prevent it from happening to others. Mama, 5-year-old Hope ran into the office, dark curls bouncing. "Daddy says it's time to go home." James appeared in the doorway carrying 3-year-old Justice in his arms. Their son had James's blonde hair and Sarah's determination. "Your mother's trying to save the world again," James said with affection. "We have to remind her to come home occasionally." Sarah looked at her family, at the foundation around them, at the life she'd built from ashes. "I was just finishing up," she said. They drove home to the house Sarah had bought 8 years ago. It had been renovated, expanded, filled with children's laughter and love. At dinner, Hope announced she wanted to be a lawyer when she grew up, to help people like Mommy does. Justice just wanted dinosaurs. After the kids were in bed, Sarah and James sat on their porch with wine and comfortable silence. "I got a letter today," Sarah said, "from Marcus's lawyer." James went still. "What did he want?" "Marcus is up for parole review next year. He wants to talk to me." "Absolutely not." "That's what I said. But his lawyer claims he's found God, completed therapy programs, wants to apologize." "He can apologize from prison," James said firmly. "You don't owe him anything." "I know." Sarah sipped her wine. "But part of me wonders, does he actually understand what he did? Or is this just manipulation to get parole? Does it matter?" "Maybe not." Sarah looked at the stars. "I have zero intention of seeing him. Or Vicky when she's up for parole in 3 years. That chapter is closed." "Good." But Sarah couldn't help wondering. Was Marcus truly remorseful? Or was he just sorry he got caught? She'd never know. And she'd made peace with that. 2 weeks later, Sarah gave a speech at a conference for domestic violence advocates. "People ask me if I'm angry," she told the audience of 200, "if I hate Marcus and Vicky for what they did. And the answer is, not anymore. For a long time I was consumed by rage, by the injustice of it all, by how close they came to succeeding. But rage is exhausting. And eventually I realized, the best revenge is building a life they can never touch. So that's what I did. I built a foundation. I fell in love with a good man. I had 2 beautiful children. I created something meaningful from the worst experience of my life. And Marcus, Vicky, they're exactly where they belong, in cells, alone, forgotten. While I'm here, living fully, loving deeply, helping others. That's not anger, that's justice. And it's so much better than revenge." The audience rose in standing ovation. After the speech, women lined up to talk to Sarah, former victims who'd used her foundation, medical professionals implementing her training programs, lawyers who cited her case when defending other abused spouses. Sarah had become a symbol, but she tried to remember she was also just a person, a mother, a wife, a survivor. That night, tucked into bed, Hope asked, "Mama, were you really poisoned?" Sarah had told age-appropriate versions of her story as Hope grew older. Now, at 5, Hope was asking harder questions. "Yes, sweetheart, a long time ago before you were born, someone hurt me, but I got help from good people, and now I'm okay." "Was it Daddy's brother?" "Yes." "Why did he hurt you?" "How do you explain evil to a 5-year-old?" "Sometimes people make very bad choices," Sarah said carefully. "He wanted things that weren't his. And instead of working hard for them honestly, he tried to take them by hurting others." "Where is he now?" "In prison, far away. He can't hurt anyone anymore." "Good." Hope snuggled into her pillow. "I'm glad you're okay now, Mama." "Me too, baby. Me too." After Hope fell asleep, Sarah went downstairs, found James in his study, working on his laptop. "Everything okay?" he asked. "Hope asked about Marcus tonight." "What did you tell her?" "The truth, age-appropriate version, that he made bad choices and is in prison now." James closed his laptop. "Do you think we should worry about him trying to contact her when she's older?" "I have restraining orders. He's forbidden from contacting any of us, and by the time he's out, if he ever gets out, she'll be an adult, able to make her own choices. I hope she chooses to never meet him." "Me too, but if she does, we'll support her." Sarah sat on James's desk. "Part of healing is accepting we can't control everything. Marcus tried to control me completely. I won't become him by controlling Hope." "You could never become him," James said firmly. Sarah hoped he was right. 10 years after the poisoning began, Sarah returned to Riverside Wellness Center. The facility had been completely renovated after the FBI shut it down. New owners, new staff, new mission. It was now a legitimate mental health facility with strict oversight and patient rights protection. They'd asked Sarah to speak at their reopening ceremony. She stood in the lobby where she'd once been dragged, drugged, imprisoned. The space looked completely different. Bright, open, welcoming. "This building nearly broke me," Sarah told the gathered staff and board members. "In these rooms, I was told I was crazy, that my memories were false, that I'd lost a baby who was still alive. But the building wasn't the problem. Buildings are neutral. It was the people inside who used this space to harm rather than help. And now, with new leadership committed to actual care rather than convenient lies, this space can heal what it once hurt. I'm honored to be part of that transformation." She cut the ribbon, toured the new facilities, met patients who were being treated with dignity and respect. In the room where she'd once been locked in the secure ward, there was now a library, bright windows, comfortable chairs, books everywhere. Sarah ran her fingers over spines and thought about the woman she'd been, crying in this exact spot, thinking all hope was lost. "You made it," she whispered to her past self. "You survived, and look what you built." Outside, James waited with 9-year-old Hope and 7-year-old Justice. They'd come for support. "How was it?" James asked. "Cathartic," Sarah admitted. "Scary, good." "Can we get ice cream now?" Justice asked. Sarah laughed. "Yes, ice cream for everyone." As they walked to the car, Hope slipped her hand into Sarah's. "I'm proud of you, Mama, for going back there." "Thank you, sweetheart." "Were you scared?" "Terrified. But you did it anyway. That's what brave means. Being scared but doing it anyway." Hope squeezed her hand. "Then you're the bravest person I know." Sarah looked down at her daughter, at James carrying Justice on his shoulders, at the life she'd fought so hard to protect and build. "No," she said, "we're brave, all of us. Together." And that was the truth. Sarah hadn't survived alone. She'd had Jennifer, James, Bobby, Judge Reed, Dr. Thompson, and countless others who believed her when it would have been easier not to. She'd built her new life on a foundation of people who cared, people who showed up, people who fought for justice even when it was hard. That was the real victory. Not Marcus and Vicky in prison, not the millions in settlement money, not even the foundation helping thousands. The real victory was standing in a parking lot, eating ice cream with her family, and feeling genuinely happy. Marcus had tried to erase her. Instead, she'd become more herself than ever before, and she was never going back. 15 years after the trial, Sarah Bennett Hayes sat in the garden of her foundation's headquarters, reviewing applications for their new legal defense fund. At 47, she'd aged gracefully, laugh lines replacing the haunted look she'd carried for so long. Her phone buzzed. A notification from the Department of Corrections. Marcus Hayes had died. Prison fight, the report said. Another inmate. No foul play suspected in the investigation. Sarah stared at the screen, felt nothing. No relief, no satisfaction. Just a distant acknowledgement that a chapter had truly closed. She called James. "Marcus is dead." Silence. Then, "Are you okay?" "I think so. It's strange. I thought I'd feel something." "You feel what you feel. There's no right way to process this." Sarah looked at the garden around her. Flowers Hope had planted. A bench Justice had built in woodshop class as a surprise. Solar panels James had installed to make the foundation fully sustainable. Her whole life was here. Marcus's death was just a footnote. "I'm not going to the funeral," she said. "No one would expect you to. His mother might want me there. Evelyn will understand." Sarah hung up and sat with the news. Marcus Hayes, dead at 53. He'd served 15 years of his 25-year sentence. Would never see parole. Would never hurt anyone again. That night at dinner, she told Hope and Justice. They were 19 and 17 now, nearly grown. "How do you feel about it, Mom?" Justice asked with his father's direct honesty. "Relieved, I think. Not happy. Just relieved that he's truly gone." Hope, studying law at Stanford, had a different question. "Will this affect the foundation? Any legal issues with him being deceased? No, the settlements were finalized years ago. This doesn't change anything. Good. Hope went back to her pasta. I have midterms. Sarah marveled at her children's resilience. They knew their history, knew what had happened to their mother, but it didn't define them. They were strong, compassionate, driven people. She'd broken the cycle Marcus tried to trap her in. 3 months later, Vicky Sinclair was released on parole, 18 years served. She was 46 now, haggard, broken. No one was waiting for her at the prison gates. No family, no friends. The woman who tried to steal someone else's perfect life had nothing. She got a job at a diner, lived in a halfway house, kept her head down. Sarah heard about it through Bobby, who still kept tabs on everyone involved in the case. She's working at Joe's Diner on 5th Street, Bobby reported. Minimum wage. Probation officer says she's complying with all requirements. Do you think she'll try to contact me? Her parole conditions forbid it, but people break rules. Sarah doubled security at her home and foundation, just in case. But weeks passed with no contact. Vicky was apparently content to disappear into obscurity. Then one day, Sarah stopped at a diner for coffee during a long day of meetings. She didn't realize it was Joe's until she was already inside. And there was Vicky, older, harder, wearing a stained uniform and carrying plates. Their eyes met across the room. For a moment, time stopped. The poisoner and the victim, the villain and the survivor. Vicky looked away first, continued serving customers like Sarah was just another stranger. Sarah could have left, should have left, but something made her sit at the counter. Vicky approached with a menu, eyes down. What can I get you? Coffee, black. Vicky poured it with shaking hands, set the mug down carefully. Anything else? No, thank you. Sarah drank her coffee slowly, watching Vicky work. The woman moved like a ghost, there but not there, serving food to people who didn't know her past. When Sarah finished, she left a $20 bill for a $3 coffee and walked out. On the sidewalk, she stopped, turned back. Vicky was watching through the window. Their eyes met again. Sarah nodded once. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, just acknowledgement. I survived. You lost. It's over. Vicky looked away. Sarah went home and never thought about her again. 20 years after the trial, Hope had become a renowned attorney specializing in domestic abuse cases. She'd won dozens of cases using strategies her mother's experience had taught her. Justice ran a tech nonprofit that connected abuse victims with resources. He'd built an app that helped women document evidence safely beyond their abuser's control. James had retired from his tech empire to work full-time at the foundation. He and Sarah were still deeply in love, still showing up for each other every day. And Sarah, at 52, she'd published her third book, testified before Congress twice about strengthening laws around gaslighting and psychological abuse, built a network of 20 foundations across the country. She'd taken the worst experience of her life and transformed it into a legacy that would help thousands of women for generations. One evening, Sarah sat on her porch with a glass of wine, watching the sunset. James came out to join her. Penny for your thoughts? I was thinking about that morning 23 years ago, when I first suspected something was wrong, when I couldn't quite identify the metallic taste in Marcus's smoothie. You think about it often? Less and less. But sometimes I wonder, what if I'd trusted my instincts sooner? Refused to drink those smoothies? Called the police after the first week instead of waiting months? You can't change the past, love. I know, but I could have saved myself so much pain. James took her hand. Maybe. Or maybe you needed to go through it to become who you are now, to build what you've built, to help who you've helped. That's a terrible thought, but possibly true. Sarah considered this. Would she trade everything she'd built to erase those months of horror? Her foundation, her children's strength, her marriage to James, her purpose. I don't know, she admitted. Part of me still wishes I'd never met Marcus, never experienced any of it. But the person I am now, I like her. She's strong, purposeful, real. She's extraordinary, James said. They sat in comfortable silence as stars emerged. Do you have regrets? Sarah asked. About us? Never. About not having biological children? James squeezed her hand. Hope and justice are mine in every way that matters. I've never felt like they weren't. Even though they're Marcus's? They're yours and mine by choice. That's more powerful than biology. Sarah leaned her head on his shoulder. I love you, James Hayes. I love you too, Sarah Bennett Hayes. Behind them through the window, they could see Hope working on case files at the dining table. Justice Video calling with his nonprofit team. Their family built from ashes. We did good, didn't we, Sarah said. We did amazing. And sitting there surrounded by the life she'd fought so hard to protect, Sarah finally let go of the last remnants of fear and anger she'd carried for 2 decades. Marcus was gone. Vicky was forgotten. The people who tried to destroy her were nothing but cautionary tales in her speeches. And Sarah? Sarah was free. Completely, utterly free. She'd survived the poison, survived the gaslighting, survived the imprisonment in the lies and the systematic destruction of everything she was. She'd survived, and she'd won. Not because her abusers were punished, though they were. Not because she weighed money or justice or revenge, though she got all three. She won because she was still standing, still fighting, still helping others find their way through darkness. She won because she chose to live. Really live. Not just survive, but thrive. That was the real ending. Not dramatic, not cinematic, just a woman on a porch with her husband, watching stars emerge, feeling genuinely at peace. Come on, James said. Hope made dinner. Justice claims he helped, but probably just supervised. Sarah laughed. So a normal dinner then. They went inside, to their children, to their family, to their life. And Sarah Bennett Hayes didn't look back. Not once, because everything she needed was right here, in this moment, in this life she'd built. The poison wife was gone. In her place stood Sarah, survivor, fighter, winner, and she was never, ever going back.